Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. My name is Tom Ricks, and I am making a podcast that I never thought I would make. Right now, I'm considering a lot of things that I want to say, and that I actually have so much to say that it's actually almost preventing me from making almost anything, simply because of the fact that I want to do a coherent narrative of at least 3 or 4 different threads, including the problems right now with Silicon Valley, the need to reboot the Constitution, or preparations that any reasonable person can make in case there is a military coup. And frankly, I think the argument can be made that we very much have a party that wants to turn our nation into an illiberal democracy of a similar vein to Turkey, Iran, or Hungary. And I think that all of those are worthy arguments. And the other thing that I've been very close to making is a simple, compact definition of exactly what's going on with the World Health Organization and why any sane person on the left would unfortunately have to agree with people on the right that the World Health Organization is a problem and that China has indeed co-opted it. But as important as every single one of those things are, a news article today in which I saw that Fox News was going to Dr. Phil, of all people, for advice on whether or not we should reopen the economy, made me realize that the right-wing media, and Fox News in particular, has become a problem. And I want to set a couple of really quick background points before I go into making my argument here. First of all, speaking of illiberal democracies, my personal bellwether as to whether or not your country is turning into a banana republic is when the government shuts down 2 opposition or neutral media organizations. So in other words, if Trump tomorrow managed to revoke the FCC license for CNN and, say, MSNBC, which he has not only threatened to do, but taken very hostile actions towards media that he does not like, quite frankly, I would be examining my options for leaving the country. So let's be clear that I do not speak of dealing with media that I do not disagree with, or with media that I do not agree with, lightly. Second of all, no matter what my personal beliefs are, the vast majority of people hold both freedom of speech and freedom of the press sacrosanct. I think the best example I can think of that has nothing to do with the modern world, but the fact that in my former religion regarding the Latter-day Saints, Joseph Smith was, among other things, killed because he attempted to shut down a newspaper that said supposedly slanderous things about him, but actually only printed the truth. And back then, people held the freedom of the press so sacrosanct that they were actually incensed that this man would shut down a newspaper that he didn't agree with. Now, they had plenty of other reasons to be angry at him. But the fact of the matter is that shutting down newspapers that you don't agree with is a great way to show that you are losing an argument. Trump himself basically attacks the press all the time. It was when we knew that he basically wants to actually be king and would be totally fine being a dictator. If Trump had a magic button, that if he pushed that button, he would actually be an actual king, and that any opposition to him would literally vaporize, I don't think there would be 5 seconds hesitation before he pushed it. He would push it immediately and push it repeatedly. Having said all that, let's discuss some facts. Not my opinion, just straight up facts. Fact, Fox News was created by Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes as a direct response to Watergate. Watergate is regarded as the low point in their fight in the culture wars by the right, when Richard Nixon basically committed electoral fraud by attacking his opposition. So Fox News is the lesson learned for the right. And it's not, their lesson is not, wow, that was really bad, let's not do that again. Their lesson was, we did not have a sufficiently powerful voice in the media to get our point of view across, and that's why we lost. That's why the bad things from Watergate happened. So that's just a fact. That you can look that up in any biography of the key individuals involved or the history of Fox News. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. Fox News exists because the right felt that they were not represented in the mainstream media. That's a fact. Another fact is that Fox News came into existence about the same time in the 1990s as the Contract for America. And the individual most responsible for that was Newt Gingrich. Not Fox News, but the wave in the 1990s, in the 1994 election, where the Republicans took the House by basically attacking Hillary Clinton's attempt at universal health care, saying it was broad government overreach. We've all heard this narrative because it's been used again and again. The fact is that the origins of that movement, and to a lesser degree the entire conservative movement as it has existed since, was that Newt Gingrich conducted some research and found that people believed in government. They found that government and Congress could solve their problems. And in the process of doing that, they basically realized that as long as people believe that Congress, and to a lesser extent the government, can solve their problems, then there's an inherent advantage for the incumbents. And that's a perpetuating cycle, because state legislatures can vote for lines that favor them. They can vote for policies that favor their party, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So between Newt Gingrich and a network of various billionaires, the most notorious of which were the Koch brothers, infrastructure was set in place to basically co-opt the levers of government at a local, state, and federal level, and to also create essentially a counter-narrative to anything that threatened their agenda. And this is a fact. This is not my opinion. This is, again, these are facts. Now, my opinion, but a pretty well-read and researched opinion, is that in the process of creating this counter-narrative, they pretty much took a kitchen sink approach, which is to say, we are going to slowly but surely politicize literally everything. Newt Gingrich also is well known for popularizing the knowledge of an effect in psychology called the Overton window. And that is that if you take the left or right position on any particular issue, the public has kind of what they view as the middle, the left, and the right, and anything outside of that window is considered extreme. And if you want to change the narrative, or as you often hear both the left and the right refer to it, you have to reframe the debate. And so rather than make an argument of, I want lesser taxes or I want more taxes, the right took the tactic strategically and short term of attacking the referee. And in the process of doing that, they basically attacked the legitimacy of government. They attacked the legitimacy of non-government organizations such as the American Bar Association to qualify judges. They attacked the legitimacy of things like the League of Women Voters to qualify debates or determine whether or not debates should be held or standards for elections. And essentially, they systemically engaged in a wholesale campaign of propaganda and lying to undermine anything and everything that would stand in their way from having their authority. Well, they kept getting more and more extreme and adopting more 1984 style tactics until the perfect personification of this mindset came into being in the form of Donald Trump. Many of them understood academically that Donald Trump did not agree to anything they theoretically stood for, but they understood that he did represent all the things that they said that they were standing for. Xenophobia, big business, and basically winning for its own sake. Donald Trump is the personification of winning for its own sake. Anyone who's studied politics can understand a lot of what I've said. How does that affect shutting down Fox News? Let's talk brass tacks, shall we? To shut down an opposition newspaper or news organization should have a very high standard. In fact, I would argue the highest conceivable standard. But I'm going to make the argument that Fox News has breached that standard. The fact of the matter is that free speech, as defined by the Supreme Court in a number of cases, and let's ignore stupid things like money is speech, because it's not, the mutually accepted threshold for what is not acceptable free speech by even the most extreme free speech advocates is, quote, shouting fire in a crowded theater, end quote. And what that really means is, the idea is that if your speech literally causes harm to life and limb for people by deceiving unto itself, that's a problem. That's a threat to the public good. And hitherto now, any sane person would agree that if I got up on national television and said, I think that everyone should go out and shoot a person that I don't like. You can pick any person you like. There's a few that are really obvious candidates. That would be subject to a number of different felony and misdemeanor charges. Terroristic threats, inciting a revolt, treason, slander. You can take your pick depending on who the target is. But we can all agree that me getting up on television and saying, kill that guy, is not acceptable speech. It's even less acceptable if I get up there and I say, kill that guy because he's not even human. He's an alien in a human disguise. Now, you cannot make all kinds of weaselly word arguments of like, well, do I really believe what I'm saying? Or, well, what if I was just expressing my opinion and not fact, right? There's a sliding slope there. I agree that there's a lot of shades of gray when it comes to free speech in the news media. But when it comes to just straight up manslaughter versus murder, you know what? It might be less jail time. It might be 5 years in jail versus the death penalty. But the fact of the matter is that when a person dies because of something I say or do, there's a credible case to be made that I am responsible for that person's death. And you can go back and forth about how you define the news or how you define free speech. But the fact of the matter is that when an organization systemically causes death, you have crossed that line. We are in a public crisis right now, the likes of which we have not seen in 100 years. The entire world, not just a couple of countries, but the entire world is shutting down. We need to coordinate, not just as a nation, not just as a state or a city, but as a global community to fight this unseen threat. Any sane person can agree on that. But rather than working to coordinate with their opposition like every other country in the world, literally every other country in the world, in Israel right now, they are so sick of Netanyahu that they have had no less than 4 elections in the last year just because they can't come up with a majority because they want to get rid of him. But because of this virus, they reached across the aisle and are trying to form a coalition. They still haven't actually managed to do it, but they understood the importance of this and they are setting aside their differences. But the Republican Party right now, all of the Republican Party, is getting up there and saying, no, we can reopen the economy, we can sacrifice 2% of our population for the good of the rich, on and on and on and on. And you know what? We all agree that this is stupid, unless, of course, you're a Trump supporter, but do we care what they think? We can all agree that there's a lot of charges that need to go around, and we hope to God that Biden will actually prosecute a few people. Personally, I don't think he will. But either way, you know what? That's not the point for the immediate light bulb that lit up in my head. Because the fact of the matter is, we've gotten so deep in the weeds of trying to bend over backwards to accommodate unacceptable behavior that we don't want to imitate ourselves, that we have lost sight of a very simple fact. And that is that Fox News is killing people. Fox News is not just lying anymore. They are flat out killing people. They are, even if it is indirectly or with malicious intent, to be honest, their behavior has crossed so many lines at this point that their motivation is irrelevant. We no longer need to prove that Fox News is deliberately ignorant or is maliciously and deliberately lying and committing slander. We don't need to ask that anymore because we know that they are exhibiting behavior that is leading to risk and actual result of death. The fact of the matter is that the crowded fire in a theater, shouting fire in a theater threshold is set if only one person dies because of their action. Now, the punishment for that threshold can vary, right? If one person dies because of a bad news story that the New York Times publishes, then they should clearly be fined. Does that justify shutting them down? Probably not. But if the New York Times continues to print not only the same story, but multiple stories that lead to multiple deaths, any prosecutor who has any sense of civic duty is going to shut down a criminal organization that is killing people. Fox News is demonstrably and wholesalely and holistically killing people with false news stories that cause people to behave in ways that risk their health and the health of others. This is a fact. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. We know that Fox News has done this. We know that they are doing this. And we know that they will continue to do this. So for Fox News, and quite frankly, the entire right wing, but let's just focus on Fox News, it is no longer a question of should we fine them or should we force them to tell the truth? Let them say whatever they want in terms of their opinion, but if they lie, they need to pay for it? No, we're past that. Fox News is a threat to democracy, and they need to be shut down.
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, available in many markets, including at Amazon.com. Copyright
2019.
Red Anvil Amalgamated, LLC.
to fight the forces of evil!